Hello, everybody! Today we'll create a trivia game with my all-time favorite GUI library, PyQt5. More specifically, I will show you how to make all kinds of different widgets with lots of interactivity, mostly in a form of mouse hover events as well as cursor adjustments. Now I will also show you how to create different frames for your application as well as how to switch between them continuously. Now, in the first part of this project, we will only focus on the design of our interface. However, in the upcoming second part, we will actually load a database of trivia questions and we will bring this game to life. So if you guys are ready for this detailed introduction to PyQt5, let's download the starter files and get going. Inside the starter files, you guys will find two different logos as well as a oneprogrammer.py file. If you guys will open this file with your favorite code editor, you can see that I already took care of all the different PyQt5 imports for you. First, we will initialize our application with app equals Q application with capital Q and capital A. And inside the round brackets, we will pass our command line arguments with sys.argv. Then we will create a window widget by typing window equals QWidget, followed by a set of empty round brackets, or as my American friends call it, parentheses. It's the exact same thing. And if we're already here, we might as well set a few basic parameters to our window object, and we'll begin with a title. So we will type window.set window title in camel case, very important. And inside the round brackets, as you guess, we will type who wants to be a programmer. Next, we will set the width of our window by typing window.set fixed width, also in camel case, and we will pick a width of 1000 pixels. I think it's gonna look really, really nice. And I would also like to add a background color, and we can easily do this with CSS. So in the next line of code, we'll type window.set style sheet. And inside a set of round brackets, as well as a set of quotes, we can begin typing our CSS commands. More specifically, I'll type background, colon, and then the color I would like to pick. In my case, it's gonna be a very dark purple color, almost black. It's 161219. And because we're writing some CSS code, we will need to finish this statement with a semicolon. And once we're done with all the basic settings, we can display our window by typing window.show. And we will also need to terminate our application. So right underneath, we will type sys.exit. Inside the round brackets, we'll specify app.exec and another set of empty round brackets to close it off. And this should generate a really nice window object. So let's save this file. Let's open our terminal. If you guys are using Anaconda, activate your environment with activate and the name of your environment, in my case main. Then we will navigate to the exact same folder where you saved your starter files. We can do this by typing cd, which stands for change directory and not current directory, as I've been wrongly teaching you for the last few videos. My apologies on that. And in my case, I saved it in the folder called Python and Trivia. And once we're in the right folder, we will type Python programmer.py and enter. And here's our beautiful empty window. So let's go ahead and set up a grid layout and place a few widgets inside it. So right underneath our window settings, we will initialize a grid by typing grid equals QGrid layout and an empty set of round brackets. And now we can apply this grid on our window by typing window set layout. And as you can guess, inside the brackets, we will specify our grid. And we will begin with a widget for our logo. So let's separate everything with a comment, display logo. We will select one of our logo files and we will assign it to a variable called image. To select this image, we will type q pixmap, and inside the round brackets, the URL of our logo. In our case, it's just logo.png. Next, we will create a label widget and we can place this image inside it. So we will type logo equals QLabel. And now we will place our logo inside this widget by typing logo, set pixmap, and inside the round brackets, as you guess, image, which is our logo image. And once we finished setting our widget, we will need to place it on the grid. We will type grid.add widget. The first parameter here is always the widget that we would like to place, in our case logo. The second parameter is the row value, in our case 0, and the column value, which is also 0, because we don't have any other elements yet. So let's save it. And actually, before we rerun this file, let me add an extra setting to my window object. I'll type window.move. And this command is going to position our window object in the x coordinate of 2700 and the y coordinate of 200. You obviously don't have to do this. I'm just doing this for the sake of this video. But if you do decide to use this positioning command, please edit your x coordinate because this is not a very conventional size. So let's go ahead and save this file and let's rerun it. And now my screen is finally capturing the entire window object, and we can see our beautiful logo on the left-hand side of the window. Now, I don't really want to leave it there. I would like to center this logo. So let's go back to our code and do this. So right before placing our logo on the grid, we will type logo.set alignment qt core.qt.align center. It's a long one, but I forgive them. And right underneath, if we're already here, we might as well add a little bit of a gap from the top part of the window and the logo. We will do this with CSS again, so we'll type logo.set style sheet. And this time we will specify margin top, and let's say we would like 100 pixels of a gap from the top to the logo. Let's save it. Let's rerun our file. Boom, we have our margins and the logo is in the center. And now we can move on with creating a button widget. We will initialize our button widget right underneath the logo. We will add a comment, button widget. We will assign it to a variable called button, and this will equal to q push button. And inside these round brackets, we will specify the text of our button, in our case, play. And now we can go ahead and add a few basic settings to this button widget. I usually like to begin by setting the cursor from an arrow to a pointing hand, just to indicate that this element is clickable. We can do this by typing button, set cursor. Inside the round brackets, we'll type q cursor. We will open another set of round brackets, and inside them we'll type qt core qt pointing hand cursor, all in camel case. In the next line, we will tackle the initial styling of our button. We will obviously add on to it, but it will be a good beginning. So we will type button dot set style sheet. So I would like my button to have a border of 4 pixels, solid, in the color of BC, as in beautiful British Columbia, 006, C, as in bright pink. And yes, we're doing pink for this GUI. And just to make sure that my head doesn't block this line of code, I'm going to split it into a few lines. And the way to do this is basically concatenating a string. So let's say this was our border. We will add a plus character, and we will go to the next line where we'll begin another string. And here I will set the border radius with border dash radius. And in my case, let's begin with 15 pixels. Let's see how it looks like, and we can go from there. This will ensure that our button has rounded corners. I would also like the text to be quite big, so we will specify a font size. And in my case, that would be 35 pixels. And of course, don't forget the semicolons in the end of each of these commands, like I forgot, okay? And we will add the very last line of styling, at least for now. And this would be the color of our text. In my case, I would like this to be white. And once we finished our basic styling, let's place this widget on the grid. We'll just copy this line of code, and instead of logo, we will change it to button, and instead of row 0, we will place it in row 1. Okay, let's save it. Let's rerun our file. And it looks like I have a typo, so let's go back to the code and see exactly what I did here. Okay, set cursor. It's not what I wanted to write. I wanted to write set cursor. I don't even know how I got to this spelling. So let's go ahead and rerun it. Boom, we have a button and no typos this time. Now, this button is kind of ugly, okay? But if we run our mouse over it, you can see that the cursor is changing to a pointing hand. But that's still not quite interactive enough. I would like to add a hover event where the background of this button changes to pink each time that the mouse is pointing over it. First, we will make our button prettier, and we will begin by adding some padding to it. And if you guys are not too familiar with CSS, padding is the space inside the element. Margin is the space outside the element. That's how we differentiate between the two. And I would like to add a padding of 25 pixels on the top and the bottom of the button, and no padding at all on the side of the button. Similarly, we will also add margin to our button, and this would be 100 pixels for the top and the bottom, and 200 pixels for the left and the right side. And since our button is much bigger now, thanks to this padding that we added here, I would also like to change the border radius from 15 to 45 because I would like my button to be as oval as possible. And once our button is pretty enough, we will tackle the hover event. So right in the beginning of our string, we will add an asterisk and a curly bracket. In the very end of our concatenated string, we will add a closing curly bracket, and we will concatenate another string to it by typing plus. And in the next line, we'll begin with an asterisk, a colon, hover, and we will open a set of curly brackets. Inside this set of curly brackets, we will specify the CSS for our hover event. In my case, if you remember, I would like my background to be bright pink. We will just copy this color, and we will paste it here, and we will finish with a semicolon, and we will add it to the rest of the commands where I forgot to add it. And this should do the trick. So let's go ahead and save this file. Let's rerun it. Boom, look at this beautiful button. And each and every time we're hovering above it, it changes the color. And this is exactly how the first frame of our trivia game is gonna look like. Now, because we'll have more than just one frame, it makes sense to put this frame inside a function and call it as needed. So let's go back to our code and tackle this. Right above our display logo comment, we will define a brand new function, which we will call frame1. And this function is not gonna take in any parameters. Now we will select all the lines of code up until the add widget command, and we will indent those lines with a tab. And now if we call frame1 right underneath this function, and we will save our file, our app is going to look exactly the same. Now, the reason why everything works perfectly is because we're only dealing with one frame. Once we'll begin to add more frames, we will need to access our widgets on a global level. Right now, they are very local, okay? Because button and logo do not exist in the global scope. For this, we will go to the very, very top of our code, and we will create a brand new variable called widgets. We will assign it to a dictionary where we can store our widget as key and value pairs. So the first key will be logo, and this key will equal to an empty list, at least at first. The next key would be button, and it will also equal to an empty list at first. And once we've initialized this global dictionary, we can append our local widgets to it. So let's go ahead and scroll down. So right below our logo styling, we will type widgets in the key of logo dot append logo. And we will do the exact same thing for our button widget. We will just scroll down a little bit. We will type widgets, which is our dictionary, button, which is our key, dot append button. And lastly, instead of placing the local variables inside our grid, we will place the global variables. So we will copy our button widget and we will add an index of -1 to it, which indicates the last item of the list. Now with PyQt5, index of -1 is going to be your best friend because index 0 doesn't always work. So we'll just use -1 instead. Let's do the same thing for our logo widget. We will type widgets in the key of logo in the index of -1. Okay, let's save it and let's have a look. Boom, everything looks the same. Nothing changed. That's exactly what we wanted. Okay, so we are done with frame number 1. So let's get rid of it and let it rest until we figure out frame number 2. And we will begin defining our brand new frame. I will call it frame 2, as you can guess. The first element we'd like to add to our interface is our score. We can store it inside a label widget by typing score equals QLabel. And inside the round brackets, let's say our score is 80. And this is just a placeholder for now. We will tackle the functionality in part 2 of this video. And I would like to place this score label in the right side of our window. So we'll just scroll a bit up and we will copy this align command from our logo widget. We will paste it right underneath and we will refactor logo to score, as well as refactoring center to right. I will also quickly add some styling to this widget. And if we're already here, let's create another label widget, which we will place right underneath the score, and this will store the question. So we will type question equals QLabel again, and as text, we will write placeholder text will go here, blah, blah. My head almost covered this line of code, but it didn't. This widget is going to be centered on our interface, so we will just copy the logo set alignment command, and we will adjust logo to question. And because each question is going to have a different length to it, some questions may take up 1 line, some questions may take up 2 lines. We will need to account for it with a word wrap value. So we will simply type question dot set word wrap true. And this will display all the long strings in several lines. And lastly, I will obviously add some styling to this question. And once we are happy with the styling of these widgets, let's go ahead and add them to our global list. So we'll scroll up. We will add another key of score, which will also equal to an empty list, and another key of question, which is also an empty list. We will scroll down. We will append our score to the global list with widgets score dot append score. We will copy this line of code. We will do the same for our question. And lastly, we will place these 2 widgets on the grid by typing grid.add widget. And it's faster to copy this value from here and adjust it to score in the index of -1. And this time we will place it on row 0 and on column 1 because it's going to be on the right-hand side of our screen. For the question widget, we will just copy this entire line and we will refactor it to question, as well as row number 1, column number 0. Now, because our question element is always going to be very wide, it would take up 2 different columns and not just 1. For this, we will need to specify a row span and a column span, which are optional parameters because they default to 1. So we will specify the row span with 1, and we will specify the column span with 2 because we need 2 different columns for this widget. And lastly, in order to display the frame, we will simply call it right after the function frame2. This time, And actually, before I run this program and get a typo error, let's fix this typo over here. So it's word wrap. Sorry, guys. And another thing I would like to fix is some of these parameters here. I've originally created this application on a different computer. I need to do some adjustments. So let's save this file. Let's finally rerun it. Boom, we have our score and we have our question. Now let's go ahead and add some buttons. So right above our add widget commands, we will type button equals Q push button. And as a placeholder text for now, we will type answer 1. And the first thing we will do is we will set the cursor to a pointer. So we'll just copy it from the first button element. And we will also predefine the width of this button by typing button.set fixed width. And I would like to have it at 485 pixels. And since we're going to have 4 of these buttons, it makes sense to wrap them up in a create buttons function, just so we don't repeat all these long lines of code. So right above the button definition, we will wrap everything up in a function, which we will call create underscore buttons. And this function will take in one string, which will represent the text of each of the buttons. We will call this string answer. And instead of passing answer number 1 as a placeholder text, we will simply pass answer, which would be our parameter. Now, don't forget the colon and the proper indentation here. And of course, we will need to return this button in the very end of our function. So we will type return button. And let's copy this function, actually cut it, and we will paste it at the very, very top, right in front of the first frame. We'll fix the indentation. And if we're already at the top of our code, we might as well add our answer buttons to the global widgets dictionary. And now we will scroll down all the way to our frame 2 function, and we will initialize these widgets. So button 1 equals create underscore buttons with the text of answer 1. Now let's go ahead and copy this. And right below, we will append these buttons to our global list. And now we can place these buttons on the grid. Let's save our file. Let's rerun it. And the buttons are there. They're just very, very hard to see. Our cursor is obviously detecting them. So let's go ahead and add some styling so they can be visible to us. We will scroll all the way up to our create buttons function. And in the very end, we will add a button.set style sheet. Okay, let's save it. And let's have a look. Cool, so our buttons are there, but I would like to have a very big gap from the edge of the screen to the button and a very small gap between each of the buttons. So let's tackle this with some parameters inside our button function. So right after our answer parameter, we will add L underscore margin, and we will add R underscore margin. And we will use these parameters inside our CSS commands. So what we'll do is we will add an additional line of code here to represent margin left. We will concatenate a string instance of L margin, which is our parameter, and we will end this with px to indicate the pixels, and a semicolon, of course. To this, we will add another line. We'll just copy this line. And instead of margin left, we will do margin right. Instead of L margin, we will do R margin. And lastly, we will need to update our function call inside frame 2. So let's scroll down over there. Okay, so instead of just keeping it at create buttons answer 1, we will add a left margin of 85 pixels and a right margin of 5 pixels to answer 1 and answer 3. And we will add the opposite margins, which are 5 and 85, to answers 2 and 4. Let's save it. Let's rerun our code. Boom! Our buttons look much better. but our score looks awful. Let me quickly fix it in the code and we can move on. And it looks much better now. I simply adjusted the padding and the border radius. You might have to do this on your end as well. So the last item we will add to this frame is a logo at the very bottom. And to save some time, we will just copy the previous logo we've initialized and we will refactor it slightly. So we'll paste it in the second frame, fix the indentation, and instead of logo PNG, we will say logo underscore bottom PNG, which is the name of our second file. And instead of margin top 100, we'll do 75, and we will add a button margin of 30 pixels. And lastly, we will need to place this widget on the grid, as you guys already know. And we will also need to specify a row span and a column span because this widget is going to take up two different columns. So the row span is 1 and the column span is 2. Cool. Let's save it. Let's rerun our file. Boom! Our beautiful logo is on a page and our second frame is complete. Now let's go ahead and learn how we can switch between the frames. So right above our create button function, we will define a brand new function called start underscore game. And we will begin by removing our widgets off the page. So for widget in widgets, which is our global dictionary. So if widget is not equal to an empty list, then we will remove this widget by typing widgets in the key of widget in the index of -1 dot hide round brackets. And since we're not using these widgets anymore, it also makes sense to remove them from the global dictionary. So we will do this with another for loop. So for I in range 0 to the length of widgets in the key of widget, we will pop our list of widgets. So we'll type widgets in the index of widget dot pop. And after we remove these widgets from the interface and from the global dictionary, we can safely call frame 2. And actually, because this chunk of code has very useful functionality to us, let's split it to another function. So we'll just cut it and we will call this function clear widgets. It will not take in any parameters. We will paste everything inside this function, fix the indentation, and we'll simply call clear underscore widgets in the first line of our start game function, okay? And once we have this function ready, we can go ahead and attach it to a click event of our button. So let's scroll to frame 1. And right before we attach this button to our dictionary, we will type button dot clicked dot connect. And inside the round brackets, as you can guess, would be our start game function. Okay, so let's save it. Let's rerun our file. Let's click on the play button. Boom! Our second frame appears. If you guys would like to see a continuous process, let's quickly add a function to these buttons as well. So let's close our interface, scroll to the very top. So let's call this function show frame 1, and we will call clear widgets in the first line of code, and in the second line of code we will attach frame 1, and we can go ahead and attach the click event to our button. So button dot clicked dot connect and show frame 1. Let's go ahead and run it. Play. Okay, so we'll need to set row and column span to frame 1. So this will take up 1 row and 2 columns, as well as our button would take up 1 row and 2 columns. Okay, let's rerun it. This time it should work fine. Boom! Perfect. So it doesn't matter on which of the 4 buttons you press, it will trigger the exact same function. So this is my favorite way of creating frame widgets in PyQt5. Now, obviously, there are several ways you can do this, and PyQt5 actually has a frame object, which you can use. If you guys want to learn more about it, check out the link to the documentation in the description of the video, and you can learn much more about this beautiful, beautiful library. Thank you so much for watching. If you guys found this video helpful, please leave it a thumbs up and maybe a nice comment. Or if you want to be extra awesome, you can share the video with your other programmer friends, and this will help me grow the channel so much faster. And the faster my channel grows, the more time I have to create these beautiful projects, and the more frequent those videos will be posted. So I hope you guys enjoy this video, and if you have any questions, definitely leave them in the comments below. I will see you next time.